Good evening. This is evening for us, and I don't know what time it is in Cambodia, but we have a
It's
what time?
7:36 a.m., Bena.
Oh, all right. Well, good morning to you and good evening for us. And today we're going to be talking with Phil Muscott, who is the headmaster of the Cambodia International School. And he's done a great deal of research on habits of mind and understanding by design, and is also talking with us and also with his students. We have the opportunity, and we will attach the interview that he did with EduPlanet 21, as well as the interview with the students. So you'll get lots of context. And so we're going to keep our focus this time on just beginning to talk with Phil about some of the ways that he really got involved with thinking about the synergy between understanding by design and habits of mind, and a little bit about the research. What did he learn? So Phil, if you can get started with just giving us a little bit of information about what intrigued you and what you learned from your research that further intrigues you.
Okay. Well, firstly, it's a real pleasure to touch base with you, Bena, and you really have been a great inspiration for a lot of the work that I do. So thank you so much. So the findings from the research, I think firstly, we learned a lot about unit plan alignment. And it's so important for us as educators to think really carefully about which habits are the most appropriate for success in authentic performance assessments. And if we make those careful choices, it really gives the students the opportunity throughout the course of the unit to focus on those habits, to think about, to look for those context clues on when to apply them, and then to self-reflect and goal set. So that was really one of the first findings. The second, and that was a real focus of the study, is about how we should spend our time as educators, because of course time is the eternal enemy for all of us. You know, of all of the things that we could be focusing on in the classroom, you know, how should we spend our time meaningfully? And I think that the study itself really indicates that focusing on the HOM is equally, if not more important, than focusing on the acquisition of knowledge and skills, the development of conceptual understandings, in terms of preparing the students for success. So I think that was also a very important finding. Thirdly, although it's but by no means the only way, the study also indicates that a reflective journal is a valid assessment instrument for measuring students' performance in the HOM throughout the unit. So to get them to identify, reflect on their application, and then goal set throughout the course of the unit does appear to be a strong predictor of success in authentic tasks. So that was quite revelationary as well.
You know, it was very interesting because we heard the students, and one of the things the students said was, in giving, you know, is there any advice that you can give to other students who might be doing this? And she said, well, you really should do it right away. You really should get it right away. Don't wait, because sometimes you forget how important it was. So, you know, keep track of it along the way, which is really a lovely way of thinking about how personal that became for her. She really was able to kind of describe her journey as she was taking on the challenge of the performance assessment. I thought that was really interesting.
So Phil, one of the other things that struck me, not just listening to you, but also thinking about what the students were saying, is consistency is everything. It's not just consistency with the reflection piece, but also consistency in looking at their goals, whether they're creating goals, modifying goals, self-evaluating on them. But can you talk a little bit about how you approach what does a reflection journal look like, for example? What do you do in relation to goal setting?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to talk about the evolution of that within CIA first. Because I think initially when we implemented it, it became too much of an afterthought. So the students were trying to think back over the course of the unit about learning activities, which HOMs, helped them and what the missed opportunities were. That has now evolved, and actually I've actually had a fair few conversations with Bena, because I'm really interested in implementing a variety of assessment tools, and it's evolved into much more learning activity focused. So it depends on their developmental stage, but it could be the teacher saying, this HOM is going to be really useful in accomplishing this task. And I want you to think about it as you're doing the task and kind of talk about and journal your experience. What context clues are you looking for? How do you think you did it? How did it help you? Or, if the students are ready for more autonomy, they can then, choose those habits themselves. So that's kind of the evolution. That's where we're heading with this.
Well, yeah, and you're talking the language of personalizing even in the statement that you just described. It would be so helpful to the learning personalized community if you could give us an example of one or two, whether it's sort of an example of the learning activities through goal setting or through reflection. That way they can have a snippet of what it looks like and feels like in a particular classroom.
Absolutely. One that I'm particularly excited about is what we call the logical process of creativity. And the reason is that I think that a lot of, people in general, not just educators, have a feeling that creativity is this sudden light bulb moment that comes out of nowhere when you come up with, innovative ideas. But I think there's plenty of research, psychological research, they say that's not the case at all. That it's about broadening our spheres of possibilities. So we've developed something which is clustering the HOMs to say, okay, as students are being presented with new information, first of all, we want them to apply past knowledge. What are their assumptions about this topic? So to get them thinking about that, talking about that, and possibly journaling that. As they are receiving the new information through whatever format it is, to get them to employ questioning and problem posing. To actually say, okay, is this new information validating what I already thought, or is it challenging it? And then it will be, of course, remaining open to continuous learning there to say, are we going to get over that challenge of cognitive bias that is such a barrier to all of us? And then finally, the creating, imagining, innovating comes in at that stage, once we've pushed the boundaries to say, okay, can I use this new learning to solve problems in innovative ways?
And the way that you described it, Phil, I think you used the phrase broadening possibilities for learners. I mean, it's
right.
so stunning, so natural, as early as the youngest student all the way through high school and university. It's something we all should be aspiring to.
Absolutely, yes. And actually one of the questions that we kind of talked about before this was what prompted me down this road. And one of those things was a real feeling that the students could do more, especially in the lower elementary school. And I listened to you and Bena talk about the deficit mindset. And that's a real problem, with teachers focusing too much on what students can't do yet, as opposed to what they're capable of. And I think that the habits are a great framework and a great set of tools to allow students to reach their potential. And I've been thinking about this, and I think whilst the work of Piaget, of course, was enormously beneficial in terms of constructivist thinking, I also think that it's held educators back in some elements, certainly in terms of the stages of development, so in particular in terms of empathy, to say that students aren't able to empathize until about 60 years old or whatever it was, and I think there's so much academic research and evidence that that's simply not the case. We see it daily at CIA First that students can listen with understanding and empathy, in grade 1 and grade 2. So again, that's I think a great example of how that our expectations should be higher for students at that young age.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you're saying, and if we go back to a Piagetian perspective, what we might say is that what's really critical is when the learning really takes place most when they're in disequilibrium. And I think that what we've done is, as a group of educators, perhaps, we've made it too safe for learning instead of allowing for the disequilibrium. So when kids are feeling frustrated or they're really not sure, then we just tell them to persist, but we don't really give them the kind of tools and the strategies that help them, just as the ones that you're giving around creativity. That's a set of strategies that say, yes, if you just want to be creative, you can draw something simple enough. But if you really want to dig in and have something that you care about and that's higher quality, you're going to have to go through a process. And the process is not a linear path.
Absolutely.
So I think, that's really what I hear you saying, and certainly when I listen to the students, that's what I heard them saying. And I've read so many of the journals that you've sent to me, and the students are really struggling very often. They're not happy. They're not saying, wow, I'm so glad you challenged me. This is great. They're saying, that's that experience of disequilibrium, but also that experience of coming out of it with something that they really do feel proud of, and that they have accomplished something that's more than what they imagined.
There's a fabulous teacher in Maine, high school English teacher, and he came up with the idea or the moniker of a dumpster project. So projects that the teacher doesn't want cluttering up his or her classroom, and that are not worthy enough for students to bring home to school. So they throw it out in the garbage before they have to deal with trying to figure out how to take it home. And the interesting part about that as an idea is that oftentimes when we're designing event-based moments, like projects or problems or challenges, it doesn't have a legacy in the learning experience of the student. It's just more of a one and done experience. And what I was listening to your students, and as you've been engaging us in conversation so far, this is really the opposite, is that the legacy is really about how they're using content to grow their thinking, to grow and stretch and flex their questioning and problem solving muscles. And the content is fodder to that desired end, as opposed to the other way around, where it may be pretty, but it's actually disposable.
Right. And I think this is why understanding by design and the habits of mind fit so neatly together, because if you really have taken time to articulate your long-term transfer goals, so you know what you're working towards, in every subject at every school level, then that's clear for teachers and students, and then they know which tools that they need, i.e. the habits, to accomplish that best.
Yeah. What do you learn from your students about their aspirations? I mean, coming in Cambodia and the situation that they're in, how do you really find out more about what they aspire to, what they're dreaming about, why they are dedicating themselves?
Well, look, I mean, I think that we should be aware that Cambodia is developing at such a rapid pace. It's such an exciting place to be. So, it's, I think that the students really see that the world is their oyster now. I mean, funny enough, I just looked at some survey data yesterday in terms of where our students want to study at university. 25% of our high school students want to study in Australia now. It's about 17% in the USA. So I guess, in comparison to maybe 10 years ago, when they really didn't have those kind of aspirations, that's just normal for them now. So a real belief in their own potential, Bena.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You can see as sort of a real spark of confidence that, we'll be ready to take it on. That was what I thought.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, and we actually joke about this amongst our faculty, is that it's almost like we've created some artificial intelligence that's turned against its owner or creator. And what I mean by that, because they are so critical of the education that they receive, but in a very, very positive way. So I think I shared with you an article for the online newspaper, which was something along the lines of the HOM, progressive or pointless. And I just thought that was wonderful because they had such a critical but balanced view about that. And also we have an organisation called Learner's Voice, which meets every week with teachers and leadership. And one of the pieces of feedback, it was essentially saying that a new teacher was implementing the habits in the wrong way. And they were saying how it should be done. And oh my God, I couldn't wish for more than this.
Well, and Bena, I mean, as Phil's been talking, especially in the last moment or so, I really heard the language of the 4 attributes beautifully connected to what he's saying. So, for example, that actual weekly experience where students and teachers come together and the opportunity for them to share their thinking, critical or otherwise, to actually create more meaningful learning experiences and designs and structures that are benefiting them. The opportunity to actually share their thinking in a public forum or in an actual publication is another fabulous example of elevating voice to continue to inspire the thinking of the school. And from a self-discovery point of view, not only is it embedded in the curriculum, but it was clearly demonstrated not only in what you're saying, Phil, but also what we heard from the students of how they were imagining their own aspirations in relation to that. So I mean, it's just such a beautiful fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting when it happens so organically and so naturally. But I will say that because you've been so dedicated to doing research simultaneously as you're doing the work, has probably developed your critical thinking and made it much more kind of intentional and visible. Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, look, this is not easy. This is not easy to implement, and we have to deal, what we call the DNA of teachers that's still there in terms of that proclivity to focus a lot on topical content and to have a kind of teacher-led classroom, but if you can create that environment where everyone is learning together, then the results just can be so amazing. And I listening to you and Allison, yesterday talking about co-creation, and I just love that term. So moving forward, and we did a little bit of action research as well at the high school level, where students were actually choosing we were giving them a real world problem to solve, but we weren't telling them what the long-term transfer goals were. They were choosing their own academic standards. They were writing their own essential questions. And then, even their own assessment rubrics, of course, with guidance from teachers. But to see that level engagement, and I think that really showed it all kind of coming together.
Well, Phil, we could probably continue talking with you for hours. Your work is inspirational, and we're so appreciative of what you're doing. So keep us in touch. Of course, you will, I think, and keep letting us know what you're doing. Also, that template where you sent it to me, and I'm not sure I can get my hands on it easily, where you're looking at creativity, I'm sure that would be something the people who are listening would be interested in as well. So
absolutely. I'll share that with you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bena.